Every nation on Earth carries a burden of red ink. The United States now shoulders more than $38 trillion in obligations, a record sum. The European Union bears close to $14 trillion. Japan's burden is nearly $9 trillion. Resource-rich giants like Saudi Arabia and industrial powerhouses like Germany and China are also laden with immense liabilities. This presents a puzzle. If everyone is in debt, who holds the wealth? This is where finance and history intersect, revealing that nothing is ever straightforward. Debt is more than a weight. It is the framework of our contemporary existence. Each conflict, each emergency, each period of growth and decline is built upon this hidden lattice of promises. Tracing the chain of ownership leads to a disquieting revelation. The world is not indebted to some external entity. It is indebted to its own system. Yet, the advantages are far from evenly shared. To comprehend how we arrived here with the planet, submerged under $315 trillion in total debt, nearly triple the value of the global economy, we must return to the origins. Long before digital payments, the concept of sovereign debt emerged not from finance, but from the battlefield. In 1694, England, locked in war with France, was exhausting its gold reserves. The Crown appealed to merchants. In return for a reliable stream of interest payments guaranteed by future taxation, they funded the war effort. To oversee this novel pact, the Bank of England was founded. This was transformative. The state could now spend funds it had not yet collected. Lenders, in exchange, received something invaluable, a government pledge that could be exchanged, purchased, or sold. This was the genesis of the government bond, the kernel of modern finance. France emulated the model. The Netherlands perfected it. The fledgling United States embraced it to fund its revolution and its westward push. National debt transformed from a sign of weakness into a badge of trustworthiness. The power to borrow became the power to govern. Where empires once seized land to plunder gold, they now issued bonds to harvest interest. The arena of conflict shifted to the ledger. Advance 300 years, and debt has become the planet's primary commodity. The U.S. owes $38 trillion. Japan has over $9 trillion. Worldwide borrowing grows by $1 trillion roughly every 100 days. Each nation borrows. Every bank lends. Each citizen, through taxes, savings, and pensions, is simultaneously a borrower and a lender. But who truly holds the opposing claim? Begin with the United States, as its debt is international. Of that $38 trillion, approximately half is held by the public, meaning investors rather than government agencies. About 2/3 of those investors are domestic entities, American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurers, and the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining third, around $9 trillion, is held abroad. Japan leads with about $1 trillion, followed by China with roughly $800 billion. Then the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. Thus, while the U.S. is indebted to China, this accounts for only about 2% of the total. Most American debt is owed to Americans. The Treasury issues bonds, domestic institutions buy them, and the Federal Reserve frequently purchases them, generating new currency in the act. American taxpayers fund the interest on those bonds, which then flows into American retirement accounts. It is a closed loop. The debt is tangible, but the lender is largely a reflection of the same structure. This circular dynamic is global. Japan lends to the U.S. via treasuries. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to emerging nations via the World Bank. Those nations, in turn, lend back to advanced economies by holding foreign reserves in Western bonds. It is a worldwide exchange of obligations, where the token is a promise. Every nation holds another's IOU. Every assurance is backed by another. It resembles a poker game where every player has borrowed chips from their neighbor. And the game continues only so long as no one leaves. Yet there is a deeper layer: the markets themselves. Behind every government bond lies a network of institutions, hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks commanding tens of trillions. They are the ultimate judges of credit. They determine which nations borrow cheaply and which pay a steep price to endure. When their confidence fades, currencies crumble, governments topple, and economies can be reshaped between sunset and sunrise. Democracy chooses leaders. Markets decide survivors. The supreme authority in this system is the central bank. Central banks do not merely administer debt, they produce it. Each time the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank acquires government bonds, it manufactures new money in return. A liability on one ledger becomes an asset on another. Every unit of currency in existence represents a unit of debt elsewhere. Truly debt-free money does not exist. Each coin, note, and digital entry carries an invisible IOU. For decades, cycle has perpetuated itself through belief. As long as investors trust governments will pay interest even if the principal is never returned, the machinery spins. But when faith erodes, the consequences are stark. Greece in 2010 saw its debt become unsustainable. Bondholders fled, yields soared, and the ECB and IMF stepped in. Their rescue demanded austerity, higher taxes, deep spending cuts, and widespread joblessness. For a generation, bailout became synonymous with hardship. In Argentina, serial defaults made debt a national scourge. In Sri Lanka, a lack of foreign currency to service loans led to fuel crises and political rupture. When the system fails, the creditors materialize: the IMF rating agencies, the anonymous bondholders who can grip nations by their finances. Yet, even after collapse, the cycle reboots. New loans replace old, debts are renegotiated, and the machine resets with fresh names on familiar balances. This is because, in our century, debt is not intended for repayment. It is designed for renewal. Modern governments do not plan to eliminate their debt, not now, not ever. This is not a secret plot. It is explicit policy. While individuals must repay loans, governments treat debt as a perpetual subscription. Issuing new bonds to retire old ones, a process called refinancing. Interest becomes the true commodity, the fee charged for stability. The global economy relies on this fee. Like a shark that must move to breathe, the financial system operates on confidence, not settlement. The U.S. will never extinguish its $38 trillion. It will refinance it indefinitely. Japan has rolled over its debt for decades, now exceeding 250% of its GDP. Yet its bond yields linger near zero. Investors are not awaiting repayment. They are waiting to renew the contract. Why? Because for them, sovereign debt is the ultimate collateral. A U.S. Treasury bond is not seen as a liability, but as a foundational asset. Pension funds hold it. Banks pledge it as security. Central banks treat it as money. The system depends on governments never clearing their debts, because doing so would erase the world's most trusted financial instrument. If Washington ever paid off its debt entirely, banks and funds globally would lose their safest asset. The money supply would contract violently, and deflationary collapse would follow. Eliminating the debt would annihilate the economy's very pillars. Thus, governments do the opposite. They issue more, not chaotically, but methodically. Debt becomes the heartbeat of capitalism, pulsing through every pension, mortgage, and market on the planet. This is why political promises to balance budgets or erase national debt are largely illusory. The true objective is not to abolish debt, but to maintain it, to keep it manageable, serviceable, and sufficiently attractive so that belief in the system never falters. For once belief vanishes, the numbers become irrelevant. Confidence shatters, interest rates explode, and an economy constructed on rolling promises seizes. That is the core truth of sovereign debt. The plan was never repayment. The plan is to perpetuate the world's belief in eventual repayment. It is a closed circuit of trust. And as long as that trust persists, the figures can expand without limit. Yet trust is not distributed equally. To say we owe it to ourselves is only partially accurate. Interest payments do not circulate evenly through society. They travel upward, from taxpayers and workers to the institutions and investors who hold the bonds. In essence, debt is not merely a transfer between nations, it is a transfer between social strata. This explains why global inequality and global indebtedness climb in tandem. The system enriches those who own debt and penalizes those who merely service it. This pattern echoes at every level, from households to nations to the entire globe. Creditors are not evil, nor are debtors purely victims. They are complementary components of the same engine. The peril emerges when the engine lacks fuel, when new borrowing cannot sustain prior promises. That is when the question, who is the creditor, ceases to be theoretical and becomes acutely personal. For at the apex of this global pyramid, there is no single entity to blame. It is not China, nor Wall Street, nor the IMF. It is all of them, and it is us. The modern financial system has transmuted debt into money itself. Governments issue it, banks amplify it, investors traffic in it, and citizens rely on it. The distinction between debtor and creditor has dissolved. Debt once signified servitude. Today, it signifies equilibrium. But if that balance ever shifts, if confidence fractures, the illusion will dissolve. And we will recall what debt truly is: a promise that cannot be sustained eternally.